Good morning, Homestead, and happy Advisory Day. Mr. Baker back again this week. Last week, or whenever you watched the first one, we talked for a while, and then we watched the YouTube video of Mark Gudgel talking about the power of the individual. This week we're going to come back, and I'm going to take you through a couple of different events from the Holocaust, one being the Evian Conference, and the second one being Kristallnacht. And we're going to do some of the history, but we're also going to talk about how does that apply to your lives. It's interesting when you think about the Holocaust, there's always the saying, never again. And sometimes people ask, well, why teach the Holocaust? I mean, if you think about the power of the statement, never again, and what that means, if you don't teach about it, how do you know what never again means? And I think it's very important that we focus on the events of the past and the people of the past, because that gives us context for who and where we are as far as history goes. You know, same thing in your lives when you look at your parents, your grandparents. And then one thing I say in my class a lot is, you know, within 10 years, how many of you are going to be married and thinking about children? So life moves by very quickly, and just to kind of consider our context. Same thing for me with history. Now let's talk about today's idea. The idea is, how do you know when to get involved in a situation? How do you know that a problem exists? How do you know how to define that problem, and then also how to address it? And history is full of examples of problems that people left unaddressed, unattended, that became major issues. Again, in your lives, maybe you see some of these things, but we don't always see from everyone's point of view. You know, we get really into a routine. We come to school, we do what we do, we have our friends, we have our activities, we go home, we do it again. It's important to kind of step back, take a deep breath from time to time, think about the world that's so much bigger than ourselves. You know, I mentioned last discussion that Carl Wilkins, who came last year, and his whole theme is world outside my shoes. So what is that world? So let's talk today about, if there's a problem, how do we handle it? How do we identify it? And then possibly, how do we move forward with addressing it? Because, you know, if you see bullying, is it a smart idea to jump right in the middle of the situation and try to diffuse it? Not always. You know, it depends upon, I guess, the severity of the situation. So let's talk about that, and let's look at some history. Let's look at the Holocaust and kind of move through some ideas of what do we do and how can we make our world here at Homestead or the different communities in which you're involved better, safer, more engaging. So I think we're going to just kind of walk through some PowerPoint slides today. I want to show you some visuals. Next week we'll do the same thing, but we'll do a lot more of it with propaganda. Here we're just going to look at confronting hatred, confronting bullying maybe, but defining the problem. What exactly is going on in a given situation? You know, a lot of times we see pictures like this, and we think of kids around the world who are not, you know, anywhere close to as fortunate as what we are. You know, we think about their struggles, we think about the hardships. You know, these kids, these families, they're tough. They're tough people. They've just been given a tough situation to deal with. And so we have to step back and kind of put ourselves in that perspective. How lucky are we? You know, how lucky are you to come to school on a day-to-day basis, to have the education that you have, to have those doors opened that need to be opened? You just have to take advantage of them. And so as we look at these images and just think, what is the problem? What has to be addressed? And if we don't know exactly what the problem is, we don't know what the next step is. So really, first we have to identify what that problem is. Do we see it clearly? Do we understand it? Do we have all points of view? Do we have the courage or the information that we need to get involved? Do we have it within ourselves? I think the answer is yes, given the proper tools. And so many times when we think about problems, we think about the results. Because something happened, here are the results. Well, what if we got involved earlier? Could these results have been redefined? And so as we go through here, we see Rwanda, we see the Holocaust, we see just different images of genocides around the world, some going on now. But again, we're back to our main issue. Are they our problem? Are they somebody else's problem? But when that hits home for us, are we going to need help? And if everybody has that attitude of it's not my problem, what's the fear? What's the worry? So we're going to look at the Evian Conference now. We're going to talk our way through it. And some of the pictures are going to be the people and the places behind the Evian Conference. So in the first image, you're just going to see the location. Evian is a location in France. It's a resort type area. And it was there that a group of people met. See, it was the Germans' plan to make Germany free of Jews, to cleanse Germany of their Jewish population. By 1941, about a quarter of the Jews in Germany had left, but there was still a problem. So in July of 1938, delegates from 32 countries met at this resort in Evian. Here are some of those people. And the conference lasted for 9 days. And so as you look at this, it's these individuals who are in a sense making a life and death choice for others. The focus of the conference was to provide a refuge for the German Jews. The outside world was aware of the violence in Germany, but remained reluctant to welcome in Jewish refugees. Many countries, many of the officials at Evian, they offered excuses for not letting the refugees in. Now, what message does that send to Germany, right? When you look at that, if people are refusing to get involved in a problem, does that empower the perpetrators? And the answer is yes. So as these individuals meet and do nothing, I mean, they decide that there is a problem, they decide something should be done, but nobody's willing to take that next step. There's even something called the Wagner-Rogers Bill. It was to try to get out 20,000 Jewish refugee children, and it failed to pass through our Congress twice. This illustration kind of shows you the plight of the people. Get out, but every time they try to go, they're stopped. So why didn't the U.S. get involved? Okay, why we have the ability. Why didn't we get involved? The one nation that did, the one nation that stayed consistent, was the Dominican Republic. And they basically said to the Jewish refugees, if you can get here, we'll take you. Have you had an Evian Conference moment in your life? Have you seen a problem but didn't respond, didn't get involved? If not, and looking now at Kristallnacht, what was the result of inaction? Kristallnacht is basically a program where the German Jews and their culture are targeted. So November 9th and 10th of 1938, the Jewish populations become the target. And what they do is they attack the Jewish culture. They attack synagogues, they attack businesses, they attack homes. Kristallnacht is defined as the night of broken glass. There was another definition given once by a historian. It was the night of falling feathers. And what that referred to was when the German officials went into people's homes and ripped apart their mattresses, looking for valuables, took them to the window. You know, these mattresses are down comforters filled with feathers. They're just being emptied out into the streets. Many Jewish families were taken to public squares and held. Their homes are taken from them. Their businesses are taken from them in some cases. Their homes are assigned to other individuals that they can live in. And they start to set fires to the synagogues. Crowds would gather, crowds would watch. The German officials were told, don't interfere. You know, let this happen. However, if the synagogues being attacked posed a threat to other German structures in the surrounding area, homes, Aryan businesses, they were to take the belongings from inside the synagogue, take them out, and burn them outside. So because the world does not act at the Evian Conference, does this empower the Germans to follow through with Kristallnacht? Does the problem get worse because of inaction? The Germans and the SS, the Gestapo, they arrested up to 30,000 Jewish males. Here you can see some of that process taking place. It's the first instance in which the Nazis incarcerated Jews on a massive scale, solely on the basis of being Jewish. So was the lack of a response from the outside world encouragement for the Germans to take that next step? But I guess the question also is, did the U.S. know? Did the U.S. totally understand what was happening? Did they have the idea of what was going on in Germany? Could we really feel the pulse of the German Jews? Were we so secure by our isolation that we felt, you know what, This is their problem and not ours. Did we ignore it? Now, when you see the next slide, there's a headline. It's the Dallas Morning News. And the Dallas Morning News actually shows a headline in which they're talking about the attack on the German Jews. They cover Kristallnacht. The outside world knew. The outside world had the information, they had the evidence, but they don't take anything. You know, they don't do anything. Looking back, hindsight's 20/20. Looking back, darn it, we should have done something. We didn't. So as a consequence for the outside world not taking action, this is a definition that the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum has for what happens between 1933, when the Nazis come to power, and 1945, the end of the war. This is a definition of the Holocaust. If the outside world knew of this definition at the Evian conference, if we could see that this is what was going to happen, that Kristallnacht was an indication of this type of situation, millions of people murdered, taken out and murdered, would we have intervened? Looking back, we should have done something. And I guess, just go back to what I said earlier. Have we had those moments? And that's something you can talk about with your advisory teacher. Have you had those moments? Should there have been action? And none was taken. This is a poem you've probably heard before, Martin Niemöller. First they came for the socialists, but I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then the trade unionists, but I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out. I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And that's another discussion point that maybe you can talk about in advisory. Is it a problem only when it affects us? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in The Cost of Discipleship, judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. By judging others, we blind ourselves to our own evil and to the grace which others are just as entitled to as ourselves. So these are just some points that I kind of take away from the Holocaust. People ask a lot of times, why study the Holocaust? Why am I interested in the Holocaust? I think there's so many lessons in the Holocaust, but you have to break them down and look at them individually. Each story has significance, and each story can connect to our own individual lives. So talk to your advisory teachers now, kind of brainstorm questions that you have about the presentation today, the Evian conference in Kristallnacht. Is there any follow-up that I can give that would be helpful to you? Maybe brainstorm, why didn't we help the Jews? What was wrong with bringing Jews into this country at the time? Also, maybe make a list of, if there's a problem, what are ways in which we can get involved? What are some ways in which students, teachers can work together to diffuse some of the issues that are here within our building, within our community? Together, this can be done. And if there's a problem, it does need to be addressed. It does need to be focused on so that the people involved can receive the help that they want and that they need. Sometimes it's just a matter of people speaking up and others taking action. So again, there's a My Big Campus site. You can go to baker-jo-advisory-holocaust if you want to join that and ask questions. If there's topics that you'd like to hear more about, just let me know. Next week I'm gonna make a presentation about German propaganda and exactly what it was that the Germans went about doing to kind of get people's mindsets where they wanted. I do want to thank Mrs. Lemke and the IMC for helping me out with videotaping this and getting it to YouTube. So a big thank you to Nancy. So from here on out, just approach me in the hallway if you have questions. Contact your advisory teacher, join My Big Campus. Hope you have a good week, and I'll see you later.